Welcome into this week's episode of Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we are here to talk all things NBA draft this time of year. That's right, we are less than a week away from the first round of the NBA draft, where we know that Cooper Flagg will be the number one overall pick. It gets interesting after that, though. We have Dylan Harper, the consensus number 2 prospect in this class, likely to go to the Spurs, barring some kind of superstar trade that doesn't seem to be out there at the moment. So 1 and 2, that all seems to be lined up. But the real intrigue starts at number 3, where the Philadelphia 76ers have a lot of decisions to make. We'll get into that here in the first segment, where Ace Bailey has become a big talking point. We'll talk about him and the other prospects in that tier. I've got it slotted as tier 3, which means a lot of different things depending on who you ask, how you're scouting, your method for going through it. So we'll break that down a little bit, talk about the prospects who could go anywhere from number 3 to somewhere around number 8. That's kind of the tier break we have as of right now. Then we'll get into the mix. We'll talk about the 2 teams that jumped into the first round. We'll talk about them in the second segment, that being the Memphis Grizzlies, who completed a trade of Desmond Bane. They now have a first-round pick that they did not have before. We'll talk about what they could do. We'll talk about what the New Orleans Pelicans, who traded back into the first round already, what could they do? They have the number 7 pick. They now have a pick in the 20s after a trade with the Indiana Pacers. Both of those happened during the finals. We'll talk about what they could do, some prospects who just fall in that range, that just beyond the lottery class of players. We'll give you a little update on the correct fits for some of those teams. And then after that, we will come back. We will wrap up today's show with just some of my favorite prospects who haven't gotten enough love, who haven't gotten enough hype over the past few weeks. I think there's some gems here. We'll talk about kind of where this board gets a little bit less interesting. We'll talk about all kinds of things that will go into how day 2 of the draft plays out. That, of course, being Thursday. The NBA draft has split up into 2 days. That was last year, the first time they ever did it. They're returning this year after some pretty, I would say it was good results, splitting it across the 2 days. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about that number 3 pick, because the Philadelphia 76ers want to contend next year. They're not looking to add some long-term project to their core. Joel Embiid, aging and injured far too often. Paul George, aging and injured far too often. Tyrese Maxey, well, now that makes this interesting because he is a little bit younger. He has had much less injury history. So there would be some argument out there I could understand, especially with what Jared McCain was able to do in his rookie season before his injury. Maybe they should go young. You saw some really good things from Quentin Grimes as well at the end of last year. Maybe you try to build on a young nucleus. I just don't think that's realistic. They've invested way too much for far too long into Joel Embiid. They went all in on the Paul George deal. You've got to play it out here. You've got to try to get a ring for your superstar, somebody who has become a face of your franchise over a long period of time. Joel Embiid has represented the 76ers, the process, as they were known. And so as we try to unpack what they are going to do with the number 3 pick, I think the obvious answer that they should try to do is trade it. They should try to trade it. If they could get a couple of veteran role players, if they could even get a chance to slide down the board and clean up their cap situation, if they can offload 1 or 2 contracts, there's a couple of different things that could unfold and help the 76ers as they build out this roster, as they try to create the best unit they can around their star players. And so we look at the number 3 pick, and the 2 primary candidates who I think fit in here would be VJ Edgecombe and Ace Bailey. Now, VJ Edgecombe, he is a shooting guard. He is not the tallest player in this draft. He's, 6'4", 6'5", in that range. Decent wingspan. really good defender, and so that gives you some hope that you could run some smaller lineups where he is in the three position. He's able to hold up against whoever he's guarding out on the wing. But you do have Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain already slotted to be in there. As I said, they probably want to bring back Quentin Grimes at whatever that price is. So we're talking about already a backcourt that has quite a few pieces. So if you add VJ Edgecombe, there is some thought, some concern over the potential fit, especially long term, because you're not talking about putting a second player at Joel Embiid's position, who, like we said, older, has had more injuries. You're not even talking about slotting someone, at least as their primary position, where Paul George would play, who, again, older, some more injury concerns, things that you would be okay filtering in behind. Instead, you're filtering in behind two guys who you believe, at least the hope would be, that you can seamlessly transition from the Joel Embiid era with Paul George alongside of him into another era of success with Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain. And so what do you then do? I think that you go VJ Edgecombe. That has been some of the intel that has been out there floating around. I believe the real reason you do it is because he's going to fit as seamlessly as any of these prospects could into just a contending team. I don't think you're going to see him out there and be like, wow, he's got a long way to go. Or wow, he has not learned to play in this team concept yet. You're not going to say those things about him. Now, my number 3 player on my board is Trey Johnson, and that's part of the reason that he is not in this discussion. He has been an on-ball player for his entire life. He has been a guy who is getting up the most shots on his team. So to go from that all the way to being, at best, the 4th option when he's on the floor, I think it'd be quite an adjustment for him to make, especially when he is, again, at that similar position to what Maxey and McCain already fill. So not an ideal fit there. You move on, and Ace Bailey is the name that has been out there from day one. He was supposed to be side by side with Cooper Flagg. And the dialogue around Ace Bailey has become extremely, extremely interesting. So I wanted to focus on it here in this first segment. I think it's important to unpack a couple of different things around Ace Bailey, his stock, the way that people talk about him, and the reality of what he is now as a player and could be long-term as a player. Because here's the thing. Ace Bailey has incredible skills. He is one of the top prospects in this draft. I believe I have slotted him all the way down now to 5th or 6th on my board. That's where he will finish. Look, that's still a high class of player. It's tier 3, yes. It's just behind his college teammate Dylan Harper, but it's still in the realm where you can easily select him at number 3 and feel good about it. Except for the fact that he is very publicly now sliding down certain draft boards. And I think there's a lot that goes into sliding down the draft board. There's a perception out there sometimes from fans that it's just like, oh, why is the media suddenly talking bad about this guy? No. This is the culmination of months and months of intel that has been received, of talking with different scouts, of understanding where things stand across the NBA on certain players. And the reason that it all kind of came out at once is because of this whole refusal to work out for teams, refusal to meet with teams. And we'll get into the issues with that in just a moment. But I do want to focus first on Ace Bailey, the player. And I understand why fans and a lot of former NBA players as well, and there's a certain group of scouts that fit into this category too. And I am not saying that there's anything wrong with it. But what I've noticed is that, especially on these podcasts, you see a lot of former NBA players who talk about the NBA, who talk about some of these young up-and-coming players. They have focused on Ace Bailey in particular and singled him out as the guy that they think is the best player in this draft class. Now, that's just... We could go into why Cooper Flagg gets discounted by certain groups of people, but we're not going to do that today. We're focusing on Ace Bailey. But I think why they elevate Ace Bailey is because his game is so reminiscent of everyone who played basketball around the neighborhood. There was that one guy on the blacktop. There was that one guy who was always at the park, always playing pickup, who just cooked everyone. He scored every time. He took all the tough shots. You could not stop him. Now, was he the player who went on to play in the NBA? No. In fact, we're hearing it from NBA players. Players who are saying, I couldn't stop this guy, therefore, he was the best basketball player I ever saw. You hear it all the time when they tell these stories about their childhood, about growing up. There's always that player who they couldn't stop, who they swear would have made it to the NBA if not for this extenuating circumstance, this thing that was going on, this lack of pursuit. They always point to certain players in their neighborhood who would have been Michael Jordan, would have been Kobe Bryant. You look at it even in the NBA since, a guy who they all look up to, all revere as one of the greatest hoopers of all time, Michael Beasley. But he had almost no NBA career. None of it panned out. Because of two things. One, it doesn't necessarily translate directly into a team setting, an organized basketball setting. There are a lot of things you can do on the basketball court that are extremely impressive, require an immense amount of skill, an innate ability that a lot of people just don't have. But if you are lacking these other areas of your game, these other mindsets, this mentality that you have to have, that is what separates the best pickup street ballers a lot of times from these guys who then go on into the NBA and have long careers. And so I am not saying that Ace Bailey cannot have a long NBA career. But what I am saying is he reminds a lot of people of that one guy that they swear is the best basketball player they've seen. But a lot of those people that they point to did not make it to the same heights that the guy who had a well-rounded game reached. So for Ace Bailey, the shot making is incredible. The ability to rise up over defenders and knock down tough shots is the best in this class. And that is a skill set that is very valuable. The problem is that is what you go to when you have to. That is what you go to when everyone has taken away the rest of your game. Look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the finals right now. He can knock down that turnaround mid-range shot, but that's not what he's going for. He's trying to get to the rim for a layup. A lot of guys trying to get an open look from three. They're not leaning into the tough shot and therefore creating inefficiencies in their game. And in an analytics-focused NBA, that's going to dock you. And so when you don't have elite measurements, when you then don't have elite defensive tools, at least defensive tape that shows that you are that high-level defender, when all of those things come off the board, will you go from everyone your whole life telling you that you are the next Kevin Durant to suddenly you are the third or fourth, maybe even fifth or sixth best prospect in this draft class? And there's nothing wrong with that. Countless players have gone from the fourth or fifth highest ranked player in their draft class to all-star, all-NBA, MVP levels. Joel Embiid with the 76ers was not the number one pick. And there were a few things that went into that. So I think that it's important to focus on where the divide is between a large group of mock draft experts, of scouts who are saying these things, and the people who are just pointing to Ace Bailey and saying, you can't tell me that is not an NBA player. Because if you watch the highlights, oh, they're incredible. Because highlights are just the makes. Now, that's the problem. You got to watch the misses too. You got to watch what percentage of the time everything went right. And the reality is Rutgers struggled to produce winning basketball. And so that is a concern that teams have. It is a justified concern. Does it mean that it's the end of all discussion? No. There's all kinds of things that go into your success from one level to the next. So I think now we have to get into how does that impact the info that has then come out over the past few days and the perceived plummet that we have seen in interest from certain NBA teams. And I think this is a very simple thing to follow. Because, in my opinion, Ace Bailey has conducted this entire pre-draft process from the combine and those comments that we talked about where it was a little bit iffy. The way he talked about his game, the way he talked about critics, it all kind of felt like, and this is the sentiment that I got from talking to people, was that everyone's eyebrow kind of went up and said, who do you think you are? Like, you're not the consensus number one pick in this draft. Now, if he came into this draft and it was known that this is the Ace Bailey draft, that this is the number one pick, running away with it, no concerns, I think that how he has conducted this entire process, not interviewing with teams, canceling the one workout that he has scheduled, asking for promises allegedly from teams. The perception that was reported out there yesterday that teams felt like he thought that he was too good to interview with a team that was picking fifth, sixth, whatever it was. If you are the number one pick, if you are running away from the field, the best player, you can do those things and nobody questions it. But when scouts are questioning and wondering whether they should have you third or sixth on their board, and you come in and act like you're number one on their board, it rubs them the wrong way. And so I don't think that this is a character thing at all. In fact, I have heard the opposite. I have heard great things about Ace Bailey's character. Everything has been top end. He's a great kid. What I have heard, though, is that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of where he stands as a basketball player. That when he enters the NBA, no team wants him to go out there and take the shots that he's saying that he takes or will take. No team wants him to go out there and be the go-to option. I mean, you even look at the options that he has. The 76ers, of course he's not going to be the number one option. The Hornets, I believe that not only LaMelo Ball, but also Brandon Miller would be ahead of him in the pecking order. You can make an argument whether or not Miles Bridges would be. You go beyond that, you go to the Jazz. Okay, maybe. But Lauri Markkanen is still there. Keontae George has spent time on the ball. You go beyond that to the Wizards. Okay, again, maybe. But Bub Carrington spent a lot of time on the ball last year. Jordan Poole, still going to be there. Bilal Coulibaly, further along in his development. He's been in the NBA for a few years now. Alex Sarr, coming along. Not an on-ball player, so not as much overlap there. But you got to keep going down the list. Obviously, you get to the Pelicans and you got Zion. So I'm not sure, unless he wants to fall into that 5-6 range, which it appears that he thinks that he's consensus at least number 3. Unless you're falling into that 5-6 range, you're not going to get to play the role that it appears he's set on playing. That concerns teams as well. So there is a lot that goes into the kind of talk that is out there about Ace Bailey. Now, a lot of it gets hyperbolized. A lot of it goes too far, but I really do think that is the core of it. Is teams questioning, does he understand where he sits on our board, and thinking that the answer is no right now? We'll see how the rest of his pre-draft process plays out. We will see where he is selected, and then we will see how the fit plays out over the next few years and all the way into his NBA career. I do think he has got still high level upside. If he can dial in all of those little things around the shot making and use the shot making as the tool to get him out of situations rather than the situation he wants to get himself into, I do think he could be one of the best scorers we have in the NBA. When we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about the two teams that moved into the first round of the draft over the past week or so. We'll talk about the Grizzlies and the Pelicans. Who should they target after the lottery selections are done, right here on Three True Values. Welcome back in as we keep rolling through this episode of Three True Values. We got two teams that are in the first round, one of them for a second time after some trades that we got during the NBA Finals. Of course, the Memphis Grizzlies traded Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic. As part of that deal, which included a lot of assets overall, they get the number 16 pick, which puts them in an interesting position where they are on the board, the holes they now have to fill moving forward. They, of course, also got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Cole Anthony in that deal. It remains to be seen if one or both of them will remain on the roster through the offseason as they have more moves to make. That's right, they're not tearing it down, guys. I'm sorry to tell you, but they will be building this roster back up just in a new image. They did not like having two small guards in that backcourt. Instead, they're going to go for a bigger group of wing options and kind of reset there, try to get more 3 and D options around Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. So after that, we had the Pelicans, who completed a trade giving up future draft capital, for the 23rd pick in the NBA draft, where they take over for the Indiana Pacers, who make a trade during the NBA Finals, one of the rarest things you see in the NBA. But I do want to go ahead and get into a couple of the prospects. There is some overlap here on who fits into the mold of the Grizzlies and the Pelicans. We'll start with the Grizzlies, where, of course, they now have a shooting guard position to fill. Desmond Bane on the way out. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he can play the 2, but a little bit more of a 3, and the 3 is a position that the Grizzlies do need help. So whether it's the 2 or the 3 that you're technically filling, you're going to have to fill it if you are Memphis. Of course, Jalen Wells, their young rookie from last year, they really like, but he's a second-round pick. He's coming along. He's developing well, but they got to have more depth there. They got to have more options. So a couple of names that I have seen thrown around and want to touch on here. One is the option of a player falling. You look at the lottery just after the lottery, and you look at a couple of names that maybe they slide down, maybe the draft sphere is a little bit higher on than teams. Whatever the case is, if they can get 216, I think they're perfect fits with the Grizzlies. That group includes Noah Essengay, who would be a huge upside swing. He plays that 3/4, very raw, very young, second youngest player in the draft class behind Cooper Flagg. And so a lot of development left there, but he's already kicked things up a notch. He's looked better and better as the season has gone along in Europe, and starting to really put together some numbers. Still got some work to do on his jump shot, which is a concern, but the defensive tools are there and they are active. He looks like he could be a long-term option, whether it's on the wing or a little bit more in that forward spot. Either way there. Colin Murray-Boyles, who you guys know I am extremely high on, love his defense and believe in his ability to upgrade offensively throughout his career. If he falls, I think another just perfect plug and play, improve that defense, keep moving forward. Then we get into the wing options. You've got Carter Bryant, who I don't see falling this far, but again, this is one of those guys that the draft sphere has fallen in love with. He has continued to move up because of his intangibles. There is every opportunity that 1, 2, maybe even 3 of these teams that are picking in this range, that's all it takes for him to fall from 9, 10 down to 16, because you've got other teams that are looking at a specific position, other teams that have fallen in love with a different prospect. That's, it's very fine margins. We saw it with Dalton Connect last year. Dalton Connect expected to go top 10. Well, then he starts falling and falling, and eventually he makes it to the late teens. Who is that going to be this year? We don't quite know. But Carter Bryant, a guy who, based off the lack of production in the box score, maybe it's him. He'd be a perfect fit in that wing room. They're looking for guys who can play and complement the star pieces that they have on the roster. Carter Bryant, that's what we love about him, is that he has been able to fill a role and do exactly what he is tasked with doing, no matter what that role was at the college level. Cedric Coward, he's been the big riser, the late push up the board. We'll talk about him more in the second segment, so I don't want to give, or excuse me, the third segment. So don't want to give away too much on him so far. Jace Richardson, he fits into this category. He's a fascinating one to me because the Grizzlies just got off of an undersized two guard who they were looking to upgrade the wing room against. Now, Jace Richardson measured at 6'1.5" at the combine without shoes. So he is actually going to decrease the height that you have in that spot. But he fits all the intangibles that the Memphis Grizzlies look for, the defense that he provides, the three-point shooting, just kind of that mentality that he brings to the court. He checks a lot of boxes. I'm curious to see, though, how much does that height box knock him as he is in the mix for this pick. And then you go the complete opposite direction with Yegor Dimon. I think he could be in play here. He is another guy who is just an analytic machine. You look at the potential to have him play off the ball. I think that's where I have kind of fallen in love with him as a prospect again, where I have moved him up my board a little bit more, is this option to have him. Yes, he can be an initiator. He can play point guard, whether it's with the second unit, whether it's in those stagger minutes when the point guard, in this case, it would be John Morant, is not on the floor. But I think he could really play the three. I mean, this is a guy who has great size, some good length, and just the intangibles, his understanding on the floor, I think could help him play off the ball and become a valuable piece for any team. And then Nique Clifford. And this is where we get into some of the overlap, because Nique Clifford would probably be moving up if he were to get to the Grizzlies, but he's another do-it-all wing. He's got all the intangibles that you want, easy plug-and-play guy for a group that is trying to retool the unit that they have. One kind of off-the-radar one I would point to is Noah Pinda. He fits a lot of the same boxes of just big size on the wing, good length. He reminds me in a lot of ways of Dylan Brooks, who we know that the Grizzlies liked at one point. They then, of course, tried to upgrade off of, but that is, of course, the goal here, to upgrade, to find guys who have a little bit more to their game than what they're showing. So Noah Pinda could be a sleeper there, especially if the Grizzlies opt to trade down at any point. Now, we look at the New Orleans Pelicans. What are they in the mix for? I think that Nique Clifford makes a lot of sense there as well. He should be in the mix. Hugo Gonzalez as well. He measured really well, I thought, overseas. I thought he got a good height measurement. I was interested in the weight that it appears that he has started to pack on. Looks like he's filling out on the wing. Will it help him even more as a defender, where I think his game is ahead on that end of the floor? So interested to see how he continues to develop. But one really interesting fit that I want to touch on here is Danny Wolf. Now, there's no guarantee he falls all the way to this point, because I think there could be a run on centers with Beringer, with Sorber, with some of those guys that are in the mix. But if Danny Wolf falls here, I think he is an excellent fit with the New Orleans Pelicans, because they've already gotten Yves Missi. You've got your rim runner. You have that just pure athlete at the center position. Well, Danny Wolf played next to a center last year, so you know that you can mix it up. You could probably play these two guys together quite a bit if you want to. Danny Wolf being on the perimeter, more of a facilitator, a guy who can help space the floor, make the right read. He can shoot it from the perimeter decently well. This is a Pelicans team that, when they had their most success over the last couple of years that they had, it was with Jonas Valanciunas, who was in the process of developing a little bit of a three-point shot while operating primarily from the top of the key. So interesting to see there what they do, but I do really like that Danny Wolf fit. the versatility that it gives you, the options going forward that it provides you, whether that's addressing the point guard position moving forward, whether that means reshaping what it looks like on the wings. A lot of things you can do if you are the New Orleans Pelicans, especially when you've got two picks now in this draft. They've got that number 7 pick where we talked about, does Ace Bailey fall? Is that the Jeremiah Fears range? Does Trey Johnson get to that point? I don't think Cone Knipple will, but if he does, an excellent selection they could make. Lots of options for the Pelicans as the new front office comes in and tries to shake things up. We'll see what other roster movement they have throughout the offseason as well. When we come back on the other side, we might have a special treat for you here. We're going to talk about some of the prospects that I think are being slept on, some of the prospects who need more love over this last week before the NBA draft, and might have a special guest right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back into 3 True Values, where we have a special guest to talk about all things NBA draft. We've got Jamie Shaw from On3. He's a basketball expert, guys. If you want to get smarter about the game of basketball, listen to what he has to say, read what he has to write. He has all kinds of recruiting intel, follows these guys all the way from the high school, even the middle school level, sometimes all the way through to when they land in the NBA. So I'm excited to talk about some of our favorite players in this draft class right now because, Jamie, you've been following them longer than I have. So I'm excited to get your input on what you've seen from these guys as they've grown and who you've really come to love throughout this draft process. So thanks for coming on today.
Man, James, that was an awesome intro, man. I appreciate that. I'm very excited to be on here. I very much respect your work, and glad that I've been able to spend some time around you these last couple of years and stuff. I'm very, very eager to see where your future is, man, because you've really come along very quickly, and you're really carving out a very important niche in this space and doing a great job with it. So excited to be here and NBA draft time, man. This is the
Yeah.
most exciting part of it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that, and let's go ahead. Let's get into it. Let's start talking because we're talking today about the prospects that we've got a little bit higher on our board than everyone else seems to, and I think we're going to agree on this first one that I'm going to throw out, and it's Cedric Coward. And this is a guy who just a few weeks ago, the public consensus at least was that he was going through this process wondering, was he going to stay committed to Duke? Was he going to go back to college? Or was he going to land in the NBA draft? I think after all this intel that we've gotten, after more and more interviews with him, hearing the way that he speaks, understanding his game, looking at some of these workouts that he's been through, I think he's getting closer to the lottery than he is the tail end of the first round. Is that the impression you're getting?
100%. I think when you look at it, going through this process, good college players, good NBA players, there's a different kind of scale there. I think what you find in Cedric Coward is his ability to create advantages, his ability to shoot the ball, stretch the floor, and the defensive upside with his length and knowledge of the game. I think there's a lot to be had there in a draft where after the top kind of tier, there's a lot of question marks. Mm-hmm. So it can come with individual value when it comes to a team. And I think when you look at somebody like a Cedric Coward, he can fit into a lot of different roles with his length, his shooting ability, his size, his frame, ability to possibly play both forward spots while decreasing advantages on defense and increasing advantages on offense.
Yeah. And this is a guy who the measurements, I mean, they just jump off the
Yeah.
page. 6'6", 7'2" wingspan. That's the kind of measurements that you just blindly throw in the pick. You look at the history of guys who have gone in the first round with those kinds of measurements, and you don't miss very often when you take a guy who looks like that and has, in addition to that, it's just the work ethic that you know that this guy has. You don't even have to listen to the interviews. I mean, just look at his pathway from Division III all the way up into the NBA draft. You know that this is a guy who has worked harder than anyone around him to get to this position.
No, 100%. And I think, too, when you see the continued development when it comes, to the counting stats along the way as well. This past year, obviously, it was a small sample size, but the 40+% three-point, the block rate that he had as well defensively and stuff, I think that you continue to see growth. You see the frame, the body, as you said, the length, but also, he's a strong, sturdy fellow with a little bit upside to go there as well. You just see somebody whose trajectory is upward and he continues to go upward. And he's got a lot of the tools that check the boxes, just like you said. It's a very intriguing outlook for him.
Now we're going to go back and forth here a little bit on some of our top guys. So uh, I'm curious to know who do you want to throw out? Who's somebody that you're just higher on than the consensus seems to be at this point?
Well, the first one to talk about for me, Thomas Sorber, Georgetown big. Obviously, he had the foot issues and had to miss the last half of the season with the foot, but he's somebody that I was higher on coming out of high school as well. He changed his entire frame, going from getting rid of excess weight. So it was kind of curious to see what he would look like in the college area. His length and physicality are off the charts. He doesn't shy away from on the block, and he's got unbelievable length. So where the height might not measure as tall as you would want a post player, the length more than makes up for it, as well as his ability to embrace physicality. He understands footwork and leverage. He gets angles, does his work early, and he's a really, really good rebounder. Yeah. That's kind of the thing as to where I saw in high school that he had was his ability to create leverage and do his work early and end possessions on the defensive glass. He's going to have to, as I said, he lost a ton of weight to get his body right. Now he's going to have to continue to add good weight on top of that to be able to play with the physicality in the league. But he's also a 72% free throw shooter, which, leads you to believe with his soft hands that he has, the shooting is something that could eventually come as he gets his balance points right and as you project to the future. I really like Thomas Sorber. I think the floor with him is high. Maybe the ceiling might not necessarily be as high. Right. But as somebody who's able to do a lot of things that you want with the physicality side, with the rebounding side, with the instinct side, could come right into an NBA team and provide value.
Yeah, I think that when you talk there about that kind of ceiling versus floor, that's one of the things that I've struggled with when I'm looking at him and thinking, okay, so if he adds that good weight that you're talking about, how much does that improve his game? Does that just take him from a good rebounder to a great rebounder and then not impact much else about his game? Or does it take him to this different level where he's then able to control things a little bit more on defense? Some of those questions, long-term projectability that are just so hard to pick through as you're looking at these prospects, especially I think the center position has become as specialized as any. I mean, you can look across sports and I don't think there's many positions that are as specialized as the center position. Every team is looking for something different. I mean, you're going to have some teams that just will not touch a guy like Thomas Sorber. You've got other teams that will not touch Danny Wolf. And it all depends on how they feel the center position interacts with the other players that they already have, whether that's at the point guard position or at those wing spots. So how much does that impact where you're putting centers on your board, in particular Sorber, where you're kind of having to look at fit in addition to what he is as a prospect?
Well, what it was with Sorber for me, obviously, on the defensive side is a big place where the centers grow. One, on offense, how do they create advantages? Is it a lob threat? Are they a vertical lob threat? Or on defensive side, can they switch? Or are they a rim protector? One of the two. Mm-hmm. Questions coming out of high school with Sorber were not a rim protector necessarily, somebody who could wall up and provide spacing there, but can he move well enough to be able to switch and do all that stuff? I thought he had a very good defensive year at Georgetown. I thought that he moved well. I thought the percentage that he had and the film shows that he is a much better mover with the lost weight than possibly expected. So I think on the defensive end, he's somebody who's able to slide. I don't know about necessarily switch per se, but at least show, hedge, and slide, and then possibly move around a little bit. And you can use the length to wall up, not necessarily be a rim protector, but not be a negative at the rim as well. So I think that Sorber is somebody who is going to find a way. I think there is a pathway to him being a starter, but I think, at the very least, as a first big type off the bench that has a long career ahead of him with the stuff that he kind of does.
Yeah. And it is also valuable just to all those points to have versatility in that center room. I think that's something that some NBA teams have gotten a little bit over interested in. We need two centers who do the same thing so that we can just switch them in and out. Like having that versatility, we see it in the playoffs all the time. Sometimes your center is just unplayable and you need that different option to go to.
And I think another thing with him too is the physicality. Right. I don't think he'll ever show away from physicality. And also, as we're seeing kind of through these playoffs, physicality is not going to go out of style. No, somebody who is willing to bang, somebody who's willing to go in there and just throw the body around a little bit, especially if he's able to get that jump shot together, like the 70+% free throw shooting, possibility. I think the physicality aspect of him is a huge factor as well.
For sure. And I want to move on now as I pick one out from my list here. And I want to get your thoughts on Rasheer Fleming because
Mm-hmm.
I am high on him. I just have him higher than I think most people have him on my board right now. And there's a couple things. So I'll give you my pitch, and then you kind of, if you want to push back, push back. If you agree with me, then we'll talk through what makes him so good. Because when I look at it, yes, I know he played at the mid-major level. I know that he didn't always have the greatest competition that he was going up against. But I look at his height and wingspan ratio. Again, we look at guys who are in that forward spot and have the 7'2" wingspan. When you have, oh, and we've lost Jamie here, but we'll try to get him back on here momentarily. But we have Jamie Shaw on here, and as we try to get him back onto this recording, we will pause here and bring him back in a second if we can get him. All right, we got Jamie back here after a couple of technical difficulties, but I want to pitch you on Rasheer Fleming. And so we've got another forward at this position with a 7'2" wingspan. I talked about you go back through the history of the NBA draft, guys with that wingspan that are taken in the first round, especially at this position, they just don't miss. You've got a long history of guys who have found their way through the NBA and been successful. So I like, just from a length perspective, I like his strength to be able to hold up as a power forward in the NBA, to hold up defensively. I look at his 3-point numbers, and I think that's a guy who can really shoot the ball. I love the idea of standing him in the corner. When I look at him, I don't see some big star potential, but what I see is a 15, 16-year NBA career as the power forward who sits down on defense, switches out onto threes when he needs to, and stands in the corner on offense, spaces the floor, and knocks down some threes. I think of PJ Tucker. I think of Jay Crowder. I think of these guys that are just staples in the NBA for so long. And I think, why would I not want to add that guy to my unit if I don't feel like there's big upside somewhere else on the board?
And I think everything that you're saying is spot on with him. I think that's the exact thought that NBA teams are having with him. The thing of it is everything that you're saying is currently theoretical.
Right.
In theory, he's going to be this. In theory, he's going to be this. And as his career has progressed in college, he has taken steps toward being able to do that. As you said, the shooting
Yes.
that he showed this year. I mean, I think he was at 14 points per game this year. So showing a little bit more consistently and being able to, especially playing with two ball dominant guards on his team as well. Right. He did a great job of showing NBA teams that he's able to find a role, find a spot, and kind of thrive in that role, which is what the NBA is all about.
Yes.
Physical measurements are off the charts. Athletic ability is off the charts. You want to trust the shooting, and I think there's a high upside there. So I 100% agree with you with everything that you said. If he doesn't even have to hit his top end outcome,
right,
to be exactly what you said. If he continues to show progress, continues to get a little bit stronger in the base, tighten things up a little bit, develop the footwork, develop the core, develop the 1-2 dribble pull up type things and all that. I think there's a very high upside with Rasheer Fleming. That's going to be up to the NBA teams about their developmental curve. Do they think that they'll be able to get him to at least to take parts of that upside? But yeah, no, I'm 100% on board with you with Rasheer Fleming. I completely understand a team taking him higher than where he's being projected right now because the value that he brings, like you said, the bust factor of somebody with that type of length and that type of athletic makeup at this point in time is smaller than others. So that's a good name.
Yeah. And he is a guy, just to round things out on him, that I love his ability to not be the star on his college team, but be clearly the best NBA prospect on his team. That shows so much to me, the same way with Carter Bryant, how he has moved up the board almost because he took a role at Arizona. Sure, he didn't have all the points, but just the pure fact that he was willing to say, hey, guys, I'm here to do what it takes for us to win. I'm here to fill in and be the best player in the best role for what this team needs. And I think that Fleming showed a lot as that as well there at St. Joe's, even though they didn't have quite the same level of success as an Arizona was able to have. But who do you have next on your list of guys that you're a little bit higher on than the consensus?
Another one for me is Maxime Reynaud out of Stanford. Legit physical size, but I think he's got a unique ability to kind of create advantages away from the basket.
Mm-hmm.
So, he came into the year this season with, questions about athleticism, questions about how well he moved, especially laterally and all that. And he parlayed that into being the most dominant big in college basketball, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
While again, like Rasheer, his team success might not necessarily been where it was. I thought he was the most dominant big in college basketball this past year, and his game developed. He was a offensive hub for his team. Kyle Smith, whom has had a lot of success developing guys, especially here recently for the NBA, was able to utilize Maxime in different roles. They were able to put him on the block in one-on-one situations, even run actions off of him on the block,
right.
weak side cutters and all that type of stuff, where he would make the pass that got the assist.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to put him at the top of the key. He showed that he was able. I think he took 5 or so threes per game. He was able to knock them down at a pretty decent rate. So to be able to stretch the floor, to be able to pull defense out and do that, and I think he moves a little bit better than possibly given credit for. Obviously, he's not going to be the fastest, probably the switchability and stuff, but the ability to get around the screen, fight around the screen, get drop coverage, and do all that. I think his unique ability at his size
mm-hmm.
to create offensive advantages away from the basket is very valuable in today's spacing of the NBA. I think that there's a unique offensive presence there, and his legitimate size. I mean, you put him in front of the rim, he might not be the best rim protector, whatever the case, but you put him in front of the rim, he's going to be able to wall up and affect plays
right.
in the area.
Yeah, the thing that I really like about Reynaud that you touched on there is that ability to be the hub away from the basket. And we talked about the fact that teams are looking for different things at center, but I think that's one of the hardest ones to find. I think rim runner probably the easiest. You can go find some freak athlete and just throw the ball up for him, but to find a guy who can be that hub and actually create advantages, like that's the key. Not just stand there and hand the ball to the point guard and turn around and call it a screen, like to actually create some advantages where other people are able to run some actions. You're able to keep him involved in the offense. I think it is a big plus for him, and something that is going to have certain teams have him way further up the board than others do as we get into this. He also had a big combine, obviously in the scrimmages. What did you see from him there, if anything? I know that some people take away a lot from what they see in those scrimmages. Some people say, just throw it out. It's just guys out there running around. Did you take anything from it? And if so, what was that?
Well, I don't think he necessarily showed anything in the scrimmages that he didn't show this season.
Mm-hmm.
He just did it, I guess, in kind of a more pickup type role,
right?
With guys that he wasn't familiar with. But I think he showed the comfort there. I think he showed a little bit more athleticism. I think he showed a little bit more movement than possible. And another interesting thing about him is that he picked up basketball full-time late. So he's kind of a late bloomer when it comes to it. So it leads you to wonder, each year in college, he got better. This past season, become the most dominant big, I thought, in college basketball. Is there still upside there? Cause there's been continued growth ever since he started. He's got, really good physical measurements and stuff. He's shown quick processing. And he's late to the game. So is there still some ceiling there to be able to run into, despite being a multi-year college player? I think more towards your question, I think toward the combine, he showed the athleticism is not is adequate enough.
Yeah.
I think there's just a lot of intrigue there as to what Maxime Reynaud could be for today's NBA for a good fit.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway, honestly, from the combine was that you're not going to be able to switch small on him. Mm-hmm. I mean, the other team that he was facing in that scrimmage, they didn't have like a true center, and he showed if you try to guard me with like a hybrid 4, I mean, I'm just gonna beat him up. I'm just gonna go down there and I'm gonna be bigger and stronger than he is. And to your point, he used his athleticism to get to those spots, and I thought it was a little bit impressive to use his athleticism against a guy who's smaller, should be quicker than him, and still get to his spots that he needed to get to, and just to the development point. I mean, this guy started as a walk-on, and now you're talking about him as the most dominant big in college basketball. The development curve there is a straight line up. So yeah, I don't think it's at all a stretch to say he might have more to unlock in his game moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and we talked about him too. Just a real quick last thing on him. Everything away from the basket, hub, setting an offense, and all that type of stuff. He can also get on the block, left hand, right hand, counters, go tos, the whole deal. So for a team that doesn't shy away from posting their bigs, which is also something we said with Sorber, physicality will never go away. I don't think being able to score 1-on-1 with your big man will ever go away in basketball either. That's
No.
something he can do as well.
Yeah, for sure. And as we move through here to another couple of guys, I want to talk about Alex Tui
Mm-hmm.
because I think that Alex Tui has just very quietly been one of the best basketball players in this draft class who does not get a lot of love because there's not this big projectable trait that you go, oh well, in the NBA he could become this big time shooter. He's going to become this big time defender. No, he's just going to go out there and he's going to be the eighth, ninth man in your rotation, and he's just going to fill that role. He's going to do whatever you need him to do. He'll rebound. He'll pass the ball a little bit. He'll score a little bit if he needs to. He can slash. He can do a lot of different little things. And I think he's got the body for it. We've seen him. He's been a guy who's been around the draft talk circles for a few years now. He's withdrawn, gone back to Australia, worked on his game. And I think looking just at what he was able to do in Australia, I look at him and I say, all right, well, this is a guy who's ready. He's a professional basketball player. When you're signing him up, you're not looking at him going, well, is he going to be an NBA player? No, this is a professional basketball player who you are bringing in and you are just inserting probably in the back end of your rotation, but he's going to be there and in the mix to get some minutes real early.
Yeah, so Tui's somebody that I saw him play when he was in high school, back when he was originally committed to Gonzaga. He came over with the NBA Academy. Got to see him actually in a couple different events. And I think that what he is, kind of to your point, is a floor raiser. He's somebody that you can put at that forward spot, whether it be the three or the four. He can knock down a shot. He can move the ball. And he's skilled. So I think there's something to be said there, never to be a number one option type guy. But again, there's only, 7, 8, 9, 10 number one options in the league. The other 98% of people are guys that fit within the flow of whatever your team's trying to do,
Right.
of your concepts. Tui's somebody that fits that. He has positional size, so he's able to toggle in between those spots. But the skill set, as you mentioned, is something that kind of separates him. So it's not a sexy pick. It's not an exciting pick, but it's something that helps your team because he's able to fit into a lot of roles of whatever it is that you want to do.
Yeah. To your point, this is not a pick that I'm raving about as like, oh, he's got to go top 20 or whatever the case is. But I think this is a guy who, if you can, you look at the run to start the second round, and it's all these playoff teams, right? You got like the Timberwolves, the Celtics, they're all in the mix there.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be picking 76ers are in that mix as well. I think if you're any of them and you can get them at the very start of the first or second round, excuse me, I think you're jumping up and down, just high fiving, going, we just got a second round pick who we know what he is. I mean, how often do you get a second round pick and you know exactly what they are as a basketball player? You're usually just kind of taking the pick and going, well, we think we can turn him into X or Y, whatever that case is. Alex Tui, I think you draft him, and that's why I think there's some potential for him to go very tail end of the first round. One of those teams saying, look, we're just not going to mess with it. We're not going to risk him falling and somebody being able to get him ahead of us.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you're spot on. There's a role with him. I mean, you're looking through the playoffs here. You see a whole bunch of guys that positional size and skilled that aren't afraid to shy away from the physicality of things that are logging legitimate playoff role minutes. And I think that he kind of fits into that, as you said, coming in as somebody that could possibly try to get into a rotation early, but then also somebody that can stay in a rotation throughout the duration of a career,
Right.
which includes second, third plus contracts.
For sure. Who else do you have here in this kind of range that you're looking at that you're higher on than everyone else?
So one for me, he's a little bit higher up. I know some people, but he's kind of polarizing with it as well. Yegor Damon. He started off hot at BYU, went through the lulls of figuring out, the American style of basketball, and then kind of picked it up there toward the end once he figured out his role. I think there was a little bit of time there when he was trying to figure things out between him and Dallin Hall as to the lead guard, on ball, off ball, and all that. Damon's a unique presence in that he is an unbelievable passer, a quick processor, and also his size. So to have somebody that size that's able to have the ball in their hands and create advantages is unique.
Yeah.
He's going to have to get his balance points down. I think once he gets his footwork and balance down, that's going to iron out his jump shot a little bit. and it will also help narrow down the turnovers also as he gets used to the speed, the length of the American game as well. But I think there's at the very base, the very core of what Yegor Damon is a 6'8", 6'9" player that's able to create offensive advantages with the ball in his hands. He can initiate the offense. He can be a secondary initiator, and if he gets the jump shot down, he could be somebody that you put on the wing. In this trend of looking at what Oklahoma City type teams are doing, they want five guys on the floor that can make a decision with the ball in their hands. The shooting's great, all that stuff, but they look to create their advantages with having five guys on the floor that can make a play. And I think Damon kind of uniquely fits that role in ability to have his positional size to create that advantage with the ball in his hand. In the trends that the NBA is kind of going in that manner, there has to be things that he tightens up. There has to be things that he polishes up. But just at the very base core of what it is, positional size, ability to create is super unique among a player. And I think the trend is to where the league's wanting to go.
I do want to get, this is a player that I've been really fascinated in, and I've talked to quite a few people about what they see him being, because you get some wildly different answers. Like some people say he's going to be one of the greatest pass first point guards of this little era here. And then you got others who say, well, I really like him to long-term become Denny Avdija. And I'm like, well, those are two completely different players that we're talking about. So do you see him as a guy that you need to commit to on the ball, at least early in his career? Are you going, if you're in charge, you're the GM or the coach, whoever's making the decisions? Obviously now everyone's in unison. It's all a big group decision, but are you going to play Dimon at the 1, or are you going to play him at the 3?
I think that's the beauty of what he is his ability to kind of fit into multiple roles. Initially, right now, I do not think that he's a 1. I don't think that that's something that you can go and put him on the court and play through those mistakes. Right. So I think you're going to have to initiate him as an off-ball type of guy. But in the way the NBA is looking with a whole bunch of on-ball guys that are self-creators, guys that do that, I think he's somebody who can elevate the floor off-ball, reinitiating offenses and being a secondary type of playmaker, to where he might not necessarily get the ball across half court, but he's the first pass. Once you get across half court, then you run your offensive sets and hitters off of him. So I think there's that. I think there's going to also with him be a learning curve. I don't think he's going to be somebody that might take a year or two before he's able to consistently be on the floor. But a team that's willing to work with that as he gets stronger, as he improves his footwork and balance points within the game, I think there's a very unique nature there of a player, again, that might be your first pass within the half court, and then you run the offense through him there.
Yeah, definitely. I like the idea of him almost being both, where it's you're the 3 out there with, maybe he's not a starter, but with the starting point guard out there with you. Yeah. And you're kind of able to work alongside him. Well, then once the starting point guard comes off the court, all right, now you can bring the ball up, and we'll give you those little bursts of being the primary playmaker as you grow into whatever role it is you're going to fill full time.
No, 100%. And I think you're spot on with that. I think that's the value that he brings in that, is that type of versatility to be able to toggle between lineups and all that.
All right. I'm going to go down the board here quite a bit, because I've got a guy, and every year, you have a second round guy who's just, I mean, it's your guy. Like, you are dead set that he's going to be something. And I'm going with Brooks Barnhizer here. I mean, out of Northwestern, I know he's not the flashiest player. He's not the sexiest draft pick. And I was almost a little bit offended. I started to see other people put him into mock drafts right after I did in my my second to most recent one, I guess. I had just had one come out yesterday. And I was almost offended. I was like, come on, guys. I thought you guys had him off of your big boards. And here I was in the second round, and now everybody's following suit. They're all putting him in there. So I guess I wasn't the only one who caught on. But this is a guy who, you look at some of these NBA models, these things that, as you talk to people, what are they looking for? One of the things that I've caught on that at least a couple of franchises really value is your stock numbers. That's steals plus blocks, and your ability to impact the game defensively. His stock numbers are through the roof. I mean, he is one of the best defensive wing prospects. If you just were going to pick out somebody and say, we need you to play wing defense in this class, I think he'd be way higher up the list than people would imagine, because of his ability to disrupt play. I think that he's got the broad shoulders. He seems to like he's got some strength out there on the wing. Now, the question is, can he develop anything offensively that translates to the NBA? Because he put up big offensive numbers at Northwestern, but I'm not sure how much of it really, as a guy who's not stretching the floor, he's not a high level 3 point shooter. Not sure how much of it really translates into NBA offense, especially being that tertiary option, probably fifth offensive option on the court. How much of an offensive role can he have? That's going to be the key for him getting from what might be a G League start into the NBA. But I just, if you told me, hey, he can be the 14th, 15th guy on your roster, I'd be like, okay, so I've got just a guy who I know. Hey, if we're not, if my coach is looking around going, all right, we're slacking on defense, this is falling apart. All right, Brooks, go in there. Just bring some intensity, bring some disruption on defense. That's what I see from him being able to do.
So it sounds like that you think the upside, the pathway is Alex Caruso.
That'd be a very interesting comp there because Caruso's more of a guard where Barnheiser's more the wing. But yeah, I like that, especially because Caruso's a guy who, I mean, we've seen him guard centers in this
Yeah.
playoff. I think that Barnheiser brings that same kind of ability to just annoy the player that he's guarding.
Mm-hmm. No, that's an interesting comp, and we're sitting here seeing too. Again, go back to what's valued in the playoffs, the teams that are winning and their roles and rotations. You're seeing kind of guys at positions that are defensive specialists, so to speak. You know, you have the TJ McConnells of the world, you have the Alex Caruso's of the world. Obviously, both are guards and more of a wing, but you know, I think being able to fit in that role is valuable.
Yeah. All right, I'll give you the floor here for one more guy that you are higher on than the consensus as we close out here today.
Oh, this is tough because I have two written down that
Well, then
I'm
you can
prepared
give
to
us
talk
both.
about.
You can give us
Okay,
both. We'll talk about both here real quick.
and they're both for different reasons,
Right.
exact opposite reasons actually. The first one, Will Riley, Illinois. I love his positional size, but I really buy into the offensive capabilities that he has. I think there's a very real scoring threat in there,
Mhm.
almost in a way that kind of Kevin Martin was a few years ago. Not saying that that's my comp for him, but
Right.
kind of in the way that Kevin Martin was just able to go out and get buckets. I think
Yes.
Will Riley is able to go out and just get buckets. I think he's going to need to continue to add size, continue to work on the footwork and balance points, getting to his spots. Where are his spots? And getting there. But I think there's just an innate ability to score the basketball, and there's a confidence there. He's got a quirky kind of
For
cadence with
sure.
his game as well. Um, that I think will keep people off balance also. But I really buy into Will Riley long term, at least as a scorer, offensive advantage creator, whether that be off the bench or sliding into a starting role. I really buy into Will Riley's scoring ability.
Yeah, super young too. I one of
Yeah.
a reclass guy, so he's got a long runway. You saw him really get way more comfortable, I thought, down the stretch for Illinois than he was early in the season.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, kind of running again with the twos when he was able to have the ball in his hands and you know, a little bit more leeway with bouncing the ball instead of moving it and getting the spots. You know, I think that there's something there. We were higher than him in the high school ranks as well early on him. And just because of the buying into the offensive capabilities that he has as
Mhm.
he continues to get stronger, you know, the strength's going to be an aspect. He's a neutral wingspan as well.
Right.
So there's going to be, you know, question marks of having to develop there. Just an ability to score the ball as he tightens things up. And the second one, the exact opposite, Drake Powell. I think Drake Powell in his high school class was the best perimeter defender out there.
Yes.
I think he showed at UNC his ability to disrupt on the defense while switching. He's still got a projectable frame that he can add good weight to. He's got unbelievable length, and his instincts are off the charts. He shot the ball better than expected at UNC.
Mhm.
The 38% number kind of carries over into what he could possibly be, providing spacing in the corner as well. But I also think there's a little bit more offensive game there than what he showed. Turn on the high school tape of Drake Powell. You see some processing. You see his ability to put it on the floor within two dribbles, get the spots, and do all that stuff. Now, it's not the most advanced in the world, but I
Right.
think there's a little bit more in there of that than what we saw. He's going to have to hang his hat on the defensive end. That's going to be what teams draft him for. That's going to be what teams um, love about him. But I think the 38% shooting was huge for him,
Mhm.
was very, very big for him. And I think there's a little bit more offensive stuff in there to where he can, you know, if you draft Matisse Thybulle in the first round and all that type of stuff, I think that he brings that type of defensive presence upside.
Yes.
I also think he has a little bit more offensive game than that to make him
Right.
more playable to grow on as well, because he's a hard worker, determined guy and stuff. Comes from an athletic family. Dad played baseball at UNC, all that stuff as well. So Drake Powell is somebody that I just think is going to find a way to make it.
Yeah. I think the Thibault comp there that you gave, obviously not a direct comparison, but
Yeah, not one to one.
I think it's really, really fascinating because I feel like people have just discounted the shooting that Drake Powell had. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't hear any. I hear more questions about his shooting than I do anyone saying, "Well, he shot 38%, so
Yeah.
he can't be that bad of a 3-point shooter." Where
Yeah.
with Thibault, I just was going through an exercise. I was looking through some different guys around the league, some of the best defensive wings that we have, and I realized Thibault is shooting well from the 3-point line the last 2 seasons, and nobody has talked about it. It feels like
Yeah.
he's still viewed as this, like, oh well, go let him play defense, but better not let him catch the ball because it's going to be a miss. And just, there's development there, and these guys sometimes you got to get away from kind of the thought about the player
Mm-hmm.
and really look at, okay, well, can he develop that shot? Can he work to continue to up the or keep the percentage where it is with more reps? Is that something that we feel like our development department can get him to that point? Because if so, you're getting a really high end rotation player there in Drake Powell.
I think two comments on that. The first one being kind of going on with your Matisse Thybulle talk. Lou Dort, sub 30% guys year one. Now he's 4 to 5 threes a game, 40+% from three,
Yes.
while playing that type of intimidating style of defense, which I think Drake Powell can get into as well. So the development of the shooting, as long as you have the stuff, I think development of shooting is very real, and it's something that can come along with, especially if you consolidate things down. These are the spots you're going to shoot from. Let's get reps there and get it growing. I think Drake Powell can do that as well. Great point. And then also, secondly, as much as we talk about on offense creating advantages, people on defense are trying to do the same thing.
Yes.
You're trying to take away those advantages that they create on offense. A lot of that comes with length, anticipation, and just feel and all that. I think Drake Powell is somebody that you put on the floor that takes away offensive advantages because of his length, his ability to close out. I think his anticipation, his ability to kind of switch throughout a single possession and everything too. So for all these teams that are trying to create, we talked about Maxime Renard, we talked about Oklahoma City, 5 guys on the floor that can make a play at the same time. To combat that, you have to have 5 guys on the floor who can move and defend. We saw that last year with the Boston Celtics when they made their run. While they had 5 guys that could create, they had 5 guys on the floor that could take away advantages, switch throughout a lineup and a rotation and possession, do all that type of stuff too. I think Drake Powell fits within that role as he continues to add strength, and then being able to provide the offensive burst, like you said, develop the shooting and all that type of stuff, only enhances where he's at stock-wise.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Jamie. We learned so much about this NBA draft class. I really appreciate you, all the help that you've been to me as we learn more about basketball every day.
James, I appreciate it, man. Keep doing yourself a great job, man. You're really taking off in this industry. So keep doing good stuff yourself as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.